Here, your SAT reading and writing guru. Today we are focusing on the writing portion of the test, and more specifically we are talking about identifying sentence errors. By the end of today's video, I hope you will be able to say, I can understand what identifying sentence errors questions are, the strategies I should use to answer identifying sentence errors questions, and what the most common types of grammatical errors are in identifying sentence errors. So first, what are identifying sentence errors, or ISE questions? These are questions that test your ability to find grammar, usage, word choice, and idiom mistakes in writing. When you're writing and making revisions, being able to find mistakes in sentences is one of the most important skills you can have. Even writers who know the rules of good written English may need to correct mistakes while they're making revisions, and that's what these questions test you on. There are 18 ISE questions total, which counts for 25.7% of the writing portion of the test. Okay, I want you to know the test instructions before the day of the test, as always, and here they are. The following sentences test your ability to recognize grammar and usage errors. Each sentence contains either a single error or no error at all. No sentence contains more than one error. The error, if there is one, is underlined and lettered. If the sentence contains an error, select the one underlined part that must be changed to make the sentence correct. If the sentence is correct, select choice E. In choosing answers, follow the requirements of standard written English. So pretty straightforward. Next, we're going to talk about strategies that you should use for answering ISE questions. First, read each sentence quickly but carefully. The error may be obvious as soon as you see it. Read the entire sentence before trying to find the error. It is hard to spot an error if you do not read the complete sentence. Read aloud if possible during your practice sessions. You obviously aren't going to be able to do this on the day of the actual test, but if you read aloud, you may hear the error immediately. Be mindful of the fact, though, that the rules for written English are stricter than those used for everyday spoken English. So even if you read something that sounds correct, you might be missing something. This one's very simple. Find the error, and it's just reminding you that unlike improving sentences questions, these questions will ask you not to fix the errors, just find them. So if you read something, you're like, well, this part doesn't sound right, then you can take a bet on it and circle it, because it's not like you have to explain why it's wrong. If it sounds wrong, then there probably is a problem. Okay, strike through answer choices that you know are correct, so eliminate options that read correctly. Develop the habit of looking for the most common mistakes people make in grammar, like subject-verb agreement, pronoun agreement, and adjective-adverb confusion. We're going to talk about these a little bit more, as well as some other common grammatical errors that you'll find in the ISE questions in just a little bit. Okay, look for errors in idioms, words or phrases that are particular to our language because of what they mean when they're used together. For example, we say listen to someone, not listen at someone. Idioms are really hard to find because they're usually like these very short words, like to and at. Plus, if you're reading very quickly, your brain might autocorrect it and you don't even notice it. So be careful with idioms. There can only be one error in the sentence, but check the remaining choices. So this just goes back to consider all answer choices before locking in your final answer. Even if you find one that you think is an error, make sure to check the other choices just to be sure. There's not going to be more than one error. Okay, during practice sessions, it would be helpful to correct the error. So not necessarily something you want to do on test day, because that might take up your precious time that you don't want to use. But when you're practicing, it might be a good idea to correct the error because then you're becoming more familiar with the language principles that drive our English language. And then sometimes no error really is the correct answer. That's kind of hard for us when we're told that this section is about finding errors. But the SAT does like to have perfect sentences. In fact, 1/5 or 3 to 4 questions of the ISE questions are going to be correct. So you're going to be choosing answer choice E. Okay, move quickly through ISE questions. The other kinds of questions that are on the multiple choice writing sections, improving sentences, which we just talked about in the last video, and improving paragraphs, which we're going to talk about in the next video, are likely going to take you more time, so try to get through these ISE questions quickly. Kind of how you get through sentence completion questions quickly, so that you give yourself more time for passage-based questions in the reading part. Okay, 2 more strategies. First, you will not be tested on spelling, slang, and cliches, so you're strictly looking for grammar errors. And then mark questions in your test booklet that you have skipped. That way, if you do have time remaining, you can go back and look at them again. Okay, next we're going to be talking about the most common grammatical errors that you find on ISE questions. These go in order from most common to least common. So the most common grammatical error you'll see in ISE questions are verbs. There are 2 possible reasons that a verb might be underlined as incorrect in the sentence: subject-verb agreement and then verb tense. So this is what you should do if you see an underlined verb. First, identify the subject or compound subject and make sure that it agrees with the verb. So singular subjects with singular verbs, plural subjects with plural verbs. If that's okay, then check the tense of the verb and make sure that they are parallel with any remaining verbs in the sentence. If that's okay, just keep in mind that sentences that have a date or specify a time period will often indicate that there is a verb tense error, so just be mindful of that. Next most common mistake in ISE questions is mistakes with pronouns. You know pronouns. These are words that take the place of nouns like she, her, he, him, they, it. And if a pronoun is underlined, make sure that it matches the noun it refers to. So singular pronouns like it or its, check those first because they are most likely wrong, and they have to match singular nouns. Plural pronouns, they or their, they obviously must match plural nouns. And if you see a collective noun in the sentence like team is made up of a group of people, but it acts as one, so it's a singular noun. Check that the subject, verb, and pronoun are all in agreement. It should all be singular. Okay, 1/3 of all ISE errors are verbs or pronouns. So if those 2 things are correct in the sentence, if they're underlined and they're correct, then most likely your answer is going to be E. Okay, next up we have lists. All the items in a list must match. We've been talking about that a lot with parallelism. You'd have like noun, 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 or verb, verb, verb. If you see a list, then look at it carefully because it's most likely the part that has the error. Adjectives and adverbs. If you see an adjective underlined, try to make it into an adverb to see if it fits the sentence better. Adverbs themselves are not really going to be wrong on their own. Most often they're right, but a lot of times an adjective should be an adverb, so check that if you see an underlined adjective. Faulty comparison. In the sentence where items are compared to one another, make sure that the comparisons are from people to people and things to things. Also look out for more, less, or less than statements, which is a dead giveaway that it's a comparison sentence. Next up we have word pairs. If you spot the words either or, neither nor, as, and not only but also, then there is a likelihood that an error will exist with the tense of the verb. So if the 2 subjects being discussed are singular, then you obviously need to have a singular verb. If they are plural, then you need to have a plural verb. Okay, more versus most and less versus least. If you see either of these words underlined, check the number of items that are being compared. If there are more than two, you need to be using most or least, like in our examples. He was more excited about the Aggie football season than she was, and we used more because only two people are being compared. But in the second sentence, he claimed to be the most excited Aggie fan of all, and there are more than two Aggie fans, so we use most. Okay, errors within an idiom. Look for words or phrases that are unique to our language, which you may at times find errors within the saying. These are the tricky ones. Not because if we catch them, they don't sound right, which they do. Like if you catch it, you'll notice, oh, that's not right, but it's just hard to catch it. For example, we would not say at the top on the hill, but instead you would say at the top of the hill. But it's usually always very short words like this, so these preposition words that are short. And look, on and of, like both O's, just one letter different, and they're both very short words. So idioms are just hard to find. Make sure that you're going very carefully through the sentence for things like that. Okay, and that brings us to our first example. Even with a calculator, you must have a basic understanding of mathematics if one expects to solve complex problems correctly. Okay, so choice A, even with, this is a conditional phrase, and it does set forth the rest of the sentence correctly, so A is not our problem. B, understanding of, the preposition of is appropriately used with understanding. You know, that's idiomatically correct, so B is not our problem. C, one expects, we have a pronoun, so we're always going to check to make sure that it matches the noun that it is replacing, and our noun that it's replacing is you, and this is where we have a problem. You is second person, the pronoun one is third person. So it looks like we have an error, which means E is not going to be our answer, but let's just consider D to make sure. We have correctly, which is an adverb, so what is it modifying? It's modifying solve. Solve is a verb, so this is used correctly. So D is not our problem. So it is C. And it does move, you know, that was very quick, but that's how you want to be moving through these ISE questions very quickly. Example 2. People who dislike cats sometimes criticize them for being aloof and independent. People who are fond of cats often admire them for the same qualities. Okay, so with answer choice A, we have to look at the word sometimes, and the word sometimes properly modifies the verb criticize, so A is not our problem. For B, we have for being, and being is the verbal form that fits idiomatically with the phrase criticize them for being. That it fits idiomatically, so B is not our problem. With C, we're looking at fond of, and the preposition of is used correctly to go with fond, so that's not our problem. And then we're looking at them for, the plural pronoun them, we need to look at what it's modifying, and it's modifying cats, which is plural, so that's not the problem. Then we have the preposition for, and that is correct to use with admire. So D is not our problem. So actually we're left with no error, and don't be surprised when that happens, because like we said, at least 3 to 4 questions are going to be perfect without any changes needed. Okay, last example. The decision that has just been agreed with by the committee members should serve as a basis for their work in the years to come. Okay, we're looking at A first, has just been. This is the present perfect verb tense, and it is a phrase. It's used appropriately to indicate an action that is completed in the present, so A is not our problem. Agreed with, and you might have even caught it when I was reading the sentence completely. It sounds weird. We don't say agreed with. We would say agreed to. If I agreed to something, I might agree with someone, but that's not what's being said here. It should be agreed to. So now we know E is not our answer, but let's look at C and D just to make sure. C is for there, and for is appropriately used to complete the expression basis for, so that's not the problem, and there modifies members, which is plural, so that's not the problem. And then D is in the years to come, and that properly expresses the time reference in the sentence. So D is not the problem, so we are left with B. This is an idiom mistake. Should be agreed to, not agreed with. Okay, and this brings our video to a close. I hope at this point you're able to say I can, understand what identifying sentence errors questions are, the strategies I should use to answer identifying sentence errors questions, and what the most common types of grammatical errors are in identifying sentence errors. So at this point we have no lecture left. We're just going to get into the classroom and get to work practicing ISE questions. I'll see you then.